Hi, everyone. Welcome to this UN Digital Community webinar. Thank you so much for joining. I'm Julia, and I suspect that some of you have already joined our session on Tuesday. We had a digital debrief and invited leaders and experts in digital from across the UN system to share their key digital takeaways from this year's UNGA and the Summit of the Future with us. And one thing that came up again and again in both the points made by our speakers and the questions by participants was the role of digital in the Pact of the Future and the Global Digital Compact. And we received a lot of feedback to the session that you would wish for a deeper dive on this, a follow-up. And so I am super excited to have Filippo Pierozzi with us today. He is a part of the Office of the Secretary General's Envoy on Technology, and he's been involved with the negotiations of this global agreement and getting the Global Digital Compact to where it is now for the past 2 years. So I bet he's very excited to see it is finally adopted. And today he will take us back and just go over what its purpose is, how it was decided on, and what the next steps are. And before I hand over to him, just a few words about the session. In case this event has been forwarded to you, this is a session that's offered by the UN Digital Community. We are one of the 6 knowledge communities that are working towards the UN 2.0 vision. And aside from offering these knowledge events and networking opportunities, we are also creating a space where you can share your work in digital and engage in conversations. So if you'd like to join us, I'll post the link in the chat so that you do not miss out on any of our future events or offers. As you may see, this session is recorded, and you'll receive a follow-up from us once it is available. And you're very welcome to engage with us during the session. We do ask you to put all of your questions in the Q&A box rather than the chat, and make use of the upvote function, because that makes it much easier for us to prioritize your questions during the Q&A part of the session. Right, and to start it off, this topic, we really would like to get a better understanding of where this audience in particular is in terms of knowledge on the GDC. So I will start a poll that should show up on your screen, and it would be great if you could respond to it and let us know how familiar you are already with the Global Digital Compact and rate it from on a scale from 1 to 5. All right, it should pop up on your screen now. I see some results are coming in, but are still going up. I'm going to let colleagues answer for a little bit longer. All right, with 0 being I do not know much about it, and then 5 being I'm very familiar. We do have most colleagues at a good 3 and like a midway point, a higher midway point. So Filippo, for you, that means that there's lots to share and lots to learn from participants today. I'm gonna share the results on your screens now. But yeah, thank you all for participating. I hope we learned a lot from today's session. And with that, I'm handing over to our speaker, Filippo, over to you.
Thanks, Julia. Thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. For those of you in New York, I hope you got a chance to see the Northern Lights. I did not, but thank you for joining us. Today, I see from the poll that there is a difference in the understanding and your awareness around what the Global Digital Compact is. Kudos to the 13 participants who said that they are 5 out of 5 on understanding what the Global Digital Compact is. So let me start from the end. The Global Digital Compact is an international agreement that was approved by consensus by the world leaders on September the 22nd in New York during the Summit of the Future. It's part of a broader vision of the UN and a broader vision from the world leaders. That is the Pact for the Future. And this Pact for the Future has an important component that is digital. And the GDC, that is the Global Digital Compact, is the first global agreement on digital technologies at large. It builds on previous achievement by the United Nations, for instance, the Tunis Agenda that was agreed upon in 2005 and the WSIS. But as you might be well aware, technology changed over the last 20 years. So the Global Digital Compact is an effort to mirror this changed reality. How did we get there? How did we get to a Global Digital Compact? This was an intergovernmental process led by 2 co-facilitators, as the jargon say, by 2 member states, one from the global north, one from the global majority, meaning Sweden and Zambia. Their ambassadors in New York led this process. So why am I here? Because we are a small office in the Secretariat of the UN. I'm based in New York, and we provided support to the co-facilitators in engaging with stakeholders, with the UN family, and just to steer them this conversation throughout the process. Stakeholders, that is this fantastic word, UN jargony word that means the private sector, means technical community, mean civil society, academia, advocates, played a very important and crucial role in shaping what the Global Digital Compact is. Through our consultations, we had 6,000 different entities contributing, I think tens of thousands of people that contributed in New York, online and elsewhere to this process. To all of you who've been engaged, thanks so much. I will explain in a bit what are the next processes, and we hope to have you still engaged. And if it's the first time that you're hearing about the Global Digital Compact, I hope that today's presentation can provide a why you should engage. So what's the content of the Global Digital Compact? And I'm now going paragraph by paragraph. I don't want to overwhelm you with that. But as I said, I would divide the content of the Global Digital Compact on technology issues that have been there before and that have been addressed. So try to renew the efforts around these issues, and some new areas. Which are the issues that have been there? For instance, connectivity, for instance, digital skills. So let me talk for a second about the structure of the Global Digital Compact. The Global Digital Compact is shaped around 13 principles. These are the principles for cooperation, international cooperation on digital technology. And this goes from multi-stakeholder engagement to respecting international law, including international human rights law, to promoting a fair and equitable economic environment. And around these 13 principles, there are 5 main objectives. No, I'm not. I'm just going off the cuff. I don't have any slides. I'm just going. No problem. There are 5 main objectives, and the first one is on closing digital divides, and this is pretty much connected to what is Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals. And inside there, you have some, as I mentioned, some continuity with the UN efforts to close connectivity gaps, digital skills gaps, but you also have emerging issues. For instance, the area of digital public infrastructure. What is digital public infrastructure? Well, for instance, digital identity and all infrastructure that are publicly operated and provide services to citizens. The second area is supporting an inclusive digital economy, also a first in UN efforts when it comes to digital and technology. The third area is a broad one, and I think is very, very important for a lot of stakeholders and our communities, that is promoting a safe and secure online space, most notably by protecting human rights. And you have several commitments in there related to misinformation, disinformation, and promoting online trust and safety. The meat of what's in the news is probably on objective 4 and 5, because on 4 you have efforts to promote international data governance and efforts on data, promoting flows of data, and especially making sure that data creates value closer to where it's produced, so it's not just extracted by a number of member states or companies. And on the 5th one is the artificial intelligence pillar, where you have several proposals. Let me just flag 2 of those. One, the creation of an international scientific panel on artificial intelligence, and the creation of a global dialogue on the governance of artificial intelligence. So this is where we are. The next steps will be implementation and endorsement. Let me say a word around the commitments that are in the compact before handing it over again to Julia, is that the Global Digital Compact has commitments from member states. Is we, the member states, we, the governments. So this is a very strong message in terms of political and economic commitment by member states. But to make sure, and I will elaborate on this in a bit, that the Global Digital Compact is really implemented, that makes a difference, not just for the UN, but for the local communities everywhere in the world, we need multi-stakeholder cooperation, and we need implementation, because these commitments, yes, is member states committing to those, but there is no single or groups of governments of member states that alone they can deliver on that. Maybe I'll hand it over to Julia again, and I can elaborate more on endorsement, implementation, next phase after Paul.
Awesome. Yeah, we thought it'd be great to hear from you again and see what your thoughts are. So I'm gonna launch not a poll, but a question, and we would like to take some time and have you interact with this and answer which of the Global Digital Compact commitments resonates the most with you. This is your opportunity just to before we go to questions later on, after some more explanations, to just see what your thoughts are and what you find the most important or the most impactful. And so we're going to just give it some time for you to answer this question. Doesn't have to be long, just a few words. All right, we have 40 responses and they're still going up. So I don't want to keep you from responding. So I'm just going to give it a couple more seconds. And in the meantime, I see a question in the chat asking to resend the link to the GDC. So I'll be doing that while we have participants. All right, numbers are still going up. We have 60 responses so far. Maybe that's the cutoff point, actually. Nope, still going up. Okay, let's give it another minute and then we'll respond to this. And any questions you have that you currently are putting in the chat, please put them in the Q&A, because that makes it so much easier for us to organize them and prioritize them later for the Q&A section. All right, it seems that we stagnated at around 70. So this is where I'll end the poll. All right, I'm sharing the results, and let me see what you can see. Filippo, can you see the different contributions?
I can't. I cannot see them at the moment.
Okay. I can see that there's 70 responses and that there's 33% of participants who is shared. Oh, you see your own response. That doesn't really make a lot of sense, does it, Zoom? Okay, that is unfortunate. I think what we'll do, and I'm so sorry about that, but now that you've had some time to think about your response, if you could, in the Q&A, just put like a, you know, with like a, just like prefacing that this is your response to which of the GDC commitments resonates most with you, then we'll get back to that. And let's
let me open, sorry to come in, let me open the chat for that. I think it might be interesting to see what others are saying. So we'll quickly open the chat and allow everyone to communicate with each other.
That's even easier.
Thank you.
Okay, well, sorry I made you go through that. But thanks for participating. That's great to see. Great to see from our end how many of you are excited to share. So Cassie is sharing that universal connectivity is what resonated most with her. When you share, make sure that you select everyone so that everyone can see. I think currently Cassie's response only went towards hosts and panelists. The role of the IGF, the Internet Governance Forum, is the one that Tracy points out. A very broad theme that is digital inclusion for all was also very much stressed in our session on Tuesday. The importance of that, both by our panelists, and a lot of the questions were around how to actually ensure that. And I think the Global Digital Compact has some ideas on that. Maybe we can have that as a priority to talk about later. On the same note, we see Adriana highlighting closing the digital divides. Carol says that the human rights focus really resonates with them. We have Shweta saying that it's inclusion. Again, inclusion is really important. Governance, focus on governance is super relevant. So I really like all of those answers. Please keep them coming. And I do see that the digital divide and closing the digital divide is a huge priority to a lot of you all that are joining now. There's AI governance. Maybe we can speak a little bit to that and what's included on AI in the pact.
Yeah, you're happy to take it from here, and also to offer like a couple of thoughts on what I'm seeing coming into the chat. And I'm a bit struggling to keep up with it, but I think one main message, and I saw it was very nicely phrased by Carrie in the chat, that is a signal. What is important of the Global Digital Compact, I think, beyond the specific lines of actions or the specific word, is that it's a message that is sending that digital technology and tech is not just a matter for geeks or for the private sector. When we're talking about international cooperation, technology is not a nice to have, it's a core part. And I think it's also a strong message that in this very particular geopolitical moment, world leaders managed to approve by consensus a document like that. And also it's very interesting to see the balance that is not a contradiction, it's actually what the GDC is all about. to kind of strengthening what was there already and what these organizations have been trying to do for the last 20, 30 years. That is like closing digital divides, strengthening digital inclusion, connectivity, digital skills to new areas. I saw several people flagging digital public infrastructure that goes hand in hand with digital public goods. I see call in data and AI governance, and I can elaborate more than that. I see someone mentioning new ways to bring connectivity to underserved or rural areas. So I think it's a mix. What is important, it's a mix of new breakthroughs and doubling down on commitments. And you mentioned the role of IGF. That will be also very important in the WSIS Plus 22 review next year. So let me say a word on what's next. What is next? A lot of streams will come out of the Global Digital Compact. Now there is a call to endorse the Global Digital Compact. You can find the form in the website. That was WSIS is the World Summit on Information Society, created a couple of decades ago. And what's next is the endorsement of the Global Digital Compact. Maybe we can share again the GDC website link in the chat. There is a call to endorse the compact. Endorse in two different forms. By endorsing, you would agree, approve the vision and the principles of the compact. Does this mean that you endorse each and every word of the compact? No, it doesn't. It's agreement with the vision and the principle laid out in the compact. There's also an option, should you wish not to endorse the compact, but you still want to contribute and tell UN which areas you're interested in, which areas you're working on, you can do so by just skipping the endorsement and going to specify the areas. Why is this exercise helpful? Well, this exercise is helpful for one of the deliverables that will come out of the Global Digital Compact, and this will be an implementation mapping done by the Secretary General. This implementation mapping will be out in early 2025, will be probably annexed to a resolution of the General Assembly. And this will be a picture of what's there and describing which are the next steps in terms of implementing. And let me again stress this point, that the Global Digital Compact, it is not and should not be just yet another declaration of principles. And it's good as a declaration of principle, but we need all of you to implement it. And by endorsing, by submitting the form, you provide helpful information to map what's out there and give the Secretary General useful information that he can then mirror in the implementation report in early 2025. Also, maybe public service announcement for some of you that are interested, that we will hold a town hall meeting for all stakeholders. And I would highly encourage civil society and the private sector, academia and the technical community to join this first town hall meeting that will be held later next week. We still have to pin down a date, and I trust Joanna and Julia to help us spreading the word on it. So then I'm here for questions. Since we have other 20 minutes, I don't want to ramble too much on any specific issues. But please, I would love to hear from you on how I can elaborate further on some of the commitments, some of the issues, or whatever you would like to learn more about the GDC.
Awesome. I think I'm just going to go with the Q&A for now. And I see that there's one question that's been highly rated that asks, the compact emphasizes the role of the private sector in achieving its goal. What specific mechanisms or incentives do you envision to ensure private sector cooperation, especially when profit motives may conflict with public interest objectives?
Oh yeah, let's start with a very easy one. I think, and also what we saw at the last UN General Assembly, is that maybe for the first time when it comes on digital technology, the private sector is keen to engage with the United Nations at the highest level. On the conversation that we had around AI and the Global Digital Compact, we had the CEO of Google joining the conversation. You had other events featuring Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI. So there is this openness from the private sector to engage with the United Nations. This openness to engage should not be misunderstood as leniency towards the private sector. So what the Global Digital Compact is trying to do, and this I would highly encourage you to go, especially on the objective 2 on inclusive digital economy and objective 4 on data, is to leverage the scale and the capabilities that are in the private sector. And here you can name out loud big tech, and to use these capabilities for the public interest. So I think is the role for governments, is the role for all other stakeholders to keep them accountable and to make sure that these actions are in the public interest. If you go on the word of the Global Digital Compact, there is this call to work with them. I don't think that the Global Digital Compact is working either in favor or against the private sector. They are a very important partner, and I think that the GDC has appropriate safeguards to make sure that their participation is steered in the public interest. But again, in the implementation phase, it would be important to hear different voices. And this is also connected to a matter of access to the processes, access to the implementation. So I would really, really highly encourage you to get involved with your regional chapters, national chapters. This can be IGF, this can be civil society organization, this can be the Resident Coordinator's Office of the United Nations, because sometimes civil society organization, small private sector companies, especially from the global majority, they don't have access to this mechanism. It would be very, very important that you engage and that your voice is heard. As the Secretariat of the UN and as the UN, we are here to make sure that your voice is heard throughout the process. And again, that the GDC contribute to the public interest and not just to the interest of some countries or companies.
Thank you so much. I have a question in the chat from Omar, who is a young panelist from Bangladesh and who's involved with the Global Digital Compact process. I'm gonna have you or invite you to ask a question if you would like, Omar. You should now have been added to the panel. Sorry for putting you on the spot, but in case you would like to ask Filippo directly, you're welcome to do so.
Thank you so much for giving me the floor. So I'm actually curious to know about the plannings that UN Tech Envoy is taking to ensure that young voices are actively involved in the decision-making process beyond the GDC. And I also want to know about how we as young stakeholders continue to contribute meaningfully to the development and implementation of global digital policies. So this is what my question is, and thank you so much for organizing this beautiful event and this making this more interactive.
Thanks, Omar. Putting you on the spot again, you have been a crucial and relentless voice throughout the GDC process. Also, the co-facilitators were very appreciative of how through 2 years you managed to convey a very clear message and call for what you wish to be in the Global Digital Compact. I think you're a best practice on how civil society can be engaged in these processes. How do we ensure that young voices are heard? We are working very closely with the office that within the system as a mandate for youth, that is the Youth Office. And we are looking for opportunities to collaborate with them so there can be an avenue for youth voices to be heard on the follow-ups. And again, youth is a very important constituency, and in the implementation and in the, let me first go with the endorsement and on this more than how what UN Tech Envoy office or the UN can do for you. I'm asking you what you can do for us, meaning like try to mobilize as many voices as possible in the among the youth advocates to endorse or just to tell what you're doing ahead of the Secretary General implementation mapping. Again, we will have events in which all stakeholders will be heard. And I would definitely be looking into organizing a specific event on GDC follow-ups with youth. We've been working in the past with civil society organization, with youth chapters of IGF, and we would definitely welcome this opportunity over the coming months.
Thank you so much, and thank you for that great question. All right, there is a lot of interest on AI in the Q&A. One that stands out is an anonymous attendee, otherwise I would invite them too. They ask that the document proposes establishing an independent international scientific panel on AI, and they ask how will this panel's work be coordinated with existing national or regional AI governance initiatives to avoid duplication or conflicts. And then maybe we pick another one specifically on AI. There's a question on how a global fund would be structured to ensure fair distribution of resources and knowledge. I think that might be referring to the same panel. But yeah, with that, I'm going to hand over to you to tell our attendees a little bit more about what's in the fact for AI.
Sure. And thanks for the anonymous questioners for this question. And again, AI is probably the main breakthrough area of the compact, the novelty, and builds upon also what and aligns with what all member states have been doing through the General Assembly. As some of you might be aware, there are 2 resolutions approved by a consensus by the General Assembly on artificial intelligence dated, I think it was March and July 2024, so 2 recent GA resolution on AI as well, and I would expect to be more over the coming months. Scientific panel, let me say what is in the Global Digital Compact, and again, sorry for those of you who are not UN for sticking to UN jargon. There is a proposal to establish an international scientific panel that is independent. So this will not be representative from specific companies serving as representative of the companies or government officials serving as government officials. This would be independent experts appointed in the national capacity to provide an assessment of risk and opportunities of AI. And there is another proposal that is linked to that, that is this establishment of an international governance dialogue on artificial intelligence. What's the rationale for that? Is that over 100 member states out of 193 of the UN, they're not part of any multilateral effort to good governing AI. You have some member states that are part of most of them in the G7, in the G20, in the OECD, and a lot of member states. Overwhelmingly small member states and developing countries are excluded from all these processes. So what happened next? Member states did not establish this panel and this governance dialogue. They called the president of the General Assembly to start another intergovernmental process. What does this mean in practice? It means that there will be other negotiations by member states in the General Assembly, and by September of next year, you will have a final proposal to define a scientific panel and a governance dialogue. So how we can avoid duplication and how this can work with national initiatives, this is a very good question for member states that will be negotiating. If I have to give my 2 cents and express my very personal opinion on that, I think that such panels should stay at the macro level and identify some trends that are relevant for all demographies and for all geographies around the world, and probably AI safety institutes and other research centers at the national level, they can tap into the global research and decline the recommendation at the national level. There was also another point in the Global Fund. Let me go with some more nerdy UN processes things. there is a call, not just for a global fund, there is a call to the Secretary General to come up with recommendations for innovative financing options for AI and sustainable developments, including considering a global fund. You can see the tension at play between member states, between those member states who wanted to have low level of ambition and those member states who wanted a high level of ambition with the launch immediate of a global fund on AI. A global fund on AI has not been created or has not been created yet, and there will be a report of the Secretary General for member states to consider this. When this will happen? During the 79th session of the UNGA. What does this mean? By next September, probably following a timeline similar to the one of the establishment of the scientific panel. Where this fund will live, how would it work? We don't know yet, but I think this is a very good area where the first question, and I want to connect to the first question of the role of the private sector, where the UN can tap into that capabilities of the tech sector for the public interest. Because some figures, some initiatives that can sound overwhelming to us as individuals, for some organizations that have a different scale, are just a tiny fraction of what they're doing. So making sure that their incentives are aligned with the UN incentives, I think will be the main challenge, but also the main deliverable, looking forward to the establishment of a fund or innovative financing option, whatever the SG will decide.
Awesome, thank you so much. We're sticking a little bit with the topic of data. There is a highly voted question, unfortunately, again from an anonymous guest, that speaks about the data governance framework that the compact calls for, which is in itself super exciting, right? Because it's the first global commitment that we have on that. And so the question is, given the diverse legal and cultural approaches to data privacy worldwide, how do you foresee reconciling these differences to achieve true interoperability?
This is another good and very tough question. And again, in my very personal capacity, I don't think there is around the corner a global alignment of privacy laws or of data laws. And I don't even think that this is the mandate of the role that the UN should play, to have a global data law. I think what the UN and what the Global Digital Compact could and should do is to facilitate dialogue between different member states, between different data authorities, to get to a common understanding and to scale up initiatives. You are seeing the importance of this at the regional level. You have, of course, you know that data law is one for the 27 member states of the European Union. You have very good initiatives at the continental level, but also at the sub-regional level in Africa. So I think the main deliverable for the Global Digital Compact in this is not aligning all data privacy law, but making sure, building from examples, virtuous examples that we have, that we scale those up, and we keep broadening the range of member states that can promote interoperability between their data systems. Data governance is an even broader issue, and one interesting proposal, a new proposal there that also speaks to what the UN system can do, is the creation of a working group of a working group on AI over the next 2 years in CSTD, is the Commission on Science and Technology for Development, that lives in Geneva. And that is also, I think, an important milestone that will help deliver towards this goal. So coordination, cooperation, no UN data treaty around the corner.
Thank you, Filippo. There is a segment in the pact on sustainable development and climate. The questions, unfortunately, aren't getting easier. We have Saeed asking a question on sustainability issues materializing and how GDC is connecting to COP and biodiversity. I'm going to invite you, Saeed, to expand on that a little as you did in the Q&A if you would like, and also feel free to introduce yourself. Now it seems like we can hear you, but it doesn't, there's no sound yet.
Hello.
We don't really hear you well. All right.
I'm sorry, I just connected, I guess.
There you go. Now we can hear
All
you.
right, I make it quick. So thank you so much for everything you did. Amazing work, and it's a marathon. We've been part of the consultation, and I mean the whole process is new for everyone. How the sustainability matters materialize in your work, and how you connect the GDC to the biodiversity and COP initiatives. And my question maybe goes to the early warning system as a kind of a focal point for the DRR and the disaster risk reduction. How GDC contributes to these essential works that the other agencies are doing across the UN, and what are the ways that it can accelerate initiatives that other agencies are doing already, and it's much needed. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Saeed. Understanding we're not under Chatham House rule, let me elaborate as best as I can for what we have on climate and environmental sustainability on the Global Digital Compact. As you know, this was a very controversial issue in the negotiation of the Pact for the Future itself. On the Global Digital Compact, you have a principle on environmental sustainability, that is pretty much what is left after hard negotiation of some more concrete actions on climate change and on environmental sustainability. So I guess one of the challenges here, since there was very strong pushing us in a good way from within the UN, and especially from civil society, and also from the private sector, from part of the private sector, to strengthen language on climate and environmental sustainability. I think one of the challenges in implementation would be to move the principle that is generic to concrete actions, because the proposal to have concrete actions on those did not survive the round of negotiation. And how does this connect to other efforts that the UN is doing on, for instance, you mentioned disaster risk reduction. I think there are other parts in the Global Digital Compact that go beyond the very environmental sustainability principle that are relevant for that. And I would most specifically point you to the data section. There is fantastic work, and we cooperated closely with UN entities, for instance, WMO. This is the World Meteorological Organization that does fantastic work on, for instance, mapping, using spatial data to kind of map and prevent extreme weather events. So I think part of the answer to your question is working on the data section to make sure that we rely on the efforts that the UN is doing at the moment, and we scale it up. And as I was mentioning, is data governance, and it's also making sure that the data have an impact for the community where data is created. And I think this is also true when it comes to monitoring the impact of climate change.
Awesome. I see hearts appearing on screen. And yeah, thank you, Said, for this question, and thank you, Filippo. There is a question by Adriana, who I know is from the International Trade Center. Adriana, I'm going to put you on the spot too. If you would like to answer, you're very welcome to.
Julia, I think Adriana had to leave. I just
Oh, okay, yeah.
find her. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going through that as well. Okay,
Sorry.
never mind. We have plenty of questions. There is also a question by Antonio Reyes, who kind of like from those deep dive questions on the individual parts and commitments, he wonders generally about the dialogue that led to this. Correct me if I'm wrong, Antonio, and over to you to ask your question.
Thank you, Julia. Can you hear me? Perfect. Excellent. Filippo, thank you so much. This is a very interesting presentation. I guess one of the points that I found quite interesting about the whole process that you've been developing is this global dialogue. You already mentioned the process of how to engage with different stakeholders. There is another concept in different UN teams that we sometimes use, which is the social dialogue as a foundational of any project. So I would like to delve into a little bit more about how social dialogue is reflected in this global dialogue and how what are the main characteristics of this process to nourish the whole work of the Global Compact. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Antonio. And pardon my ignorance, I would have a follow-up question for you if you, in 1 second, can elaborate on what you mean by social dialogue. And sorry for not knowing that.
No worries. All good. I know that these concepts sometimes they might be a little bit confusing, but sometimes when we talk about social dialogue, it's this kind of meetings with the different stakeholders to exchange the concerns and some potential ideas to solve collective problems, which is quite linked to this sort of multi-stakeholder dynamics in order to come up with solutions that are legitimate, that are democratic, and most importantly, that are inclusive, especially when it comes to solutions that they have to involve the engagement of people to deploy some sort of actions. So I don't know if this is the kind of same perspective using this concept that you mentioned, which is the global dialogue, or it refers to a completely different process.
I think there are some points in common. Again, the process was developed through consultations with stakeholders. Again, we tried, this is the mandate of the office where I'm working, to offer a first point of entry to the UN system for stakeholders. We tried to ensure that all voices were heard. Sometimes the intergovernmental process puts some limits to it. Sometimes stakeholders did not engage to the level that they would have wished. Our role throughout has been to make sure that their voice were heard, and this will probably be also our role moving forward. What you mentioned is probably also linked to a different dimension that will come into play, but it will not be directly with us. So maybe it's a point for the rest of the UN system that is in this call, that is that the implementation of the Global Digital Compact that is currently being designed and we're still in the thought process, it will surely be decentralized, meaning that we will need all relevant UN agencies that have mandates for these issues that we mentioned during the last 45 minutes, that they take this on board. And I think it will be very, very important that in designing the solution, the process keep being multi-stakeholder, meaning when it comes to implementing the GDC, and that we have avenues to make sure that we hear the inputs through social dialogue or whichever form of dialogues. I can reconnect to the question that Omar asked about how we make sure that youth is engaged. So ensuring that their platforms, they are running their core part of the process, and also they're running parallel to the process and fit into it. I think it would be very, very important.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Antonio, for your question. We have another one by Josine. We had a lot of interest in the chat on closing the digital divide, on the issue of digital inclusion. And I think her question goes a little bit deeper and wonders what else is behind the digital divide. And so I'm gonna hand over to her to pose her question.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. And thank you so much for the hosts for this platform and the opportunity. So my question around the digital divide is that we often talk about connectivity and infrastructure. And yes, definitely those need to be bridged. But I also find from experience that digital skills education and maybe more importantly, leadership development to drive digital education is often lacking. So I must say, I haven't gone through the Digital Compact in detail yet. I've glanced through it. So I've seen some reference made to capacity building, but I couldn't find a clear commitment. How do we deal with this human capacity building component of bridging a digital divide?
Using it, yes. Absolutely, fully second each and every word that you said. And also you will find some references in the compact, but again, I think the challenge is, as I was mentioning for climate, maybe is try to hear the song from the notes that are like here and there in the compact. There are strong commitments for digital skills. There is the issue related to data empowerment on the data section. There are issues around upskilling for the future in the AI part. There are a lot of relevant provisions in Objective 3 on human rights, on misinformation, disinformation. There is no specific provision on leadership. That is a very good point when it comes to upskilling, reskilling, especially for youth. And the origin of the Global Digital Compact, and I would highly encourage you to read that, is the position of the Secretary General at the very beginning of the process. This is called the policy brief. And in other words, is the vision of the Secretary General on the Global Digital Compact. And this is dated May 2023. And very eloquently, he pointed to all the digital divides, flagging that we don't only have the usual connectivity divide, but we have a skill divide, we have a data divide, we have a governance divide. The GDC aims at closing them all. And again, the reference to digital skills is there, and there is room to use the language to do something that is more tailored for instance, you mentioned for developing capacity also in leadership skills on how you use digital technology to promote it.
Okay, thank you very much. So maybe I think they were also present in the sidelines on during the Summit of the Future. The Global Alliance for Digital Education and Sustainability already provides a bit more handholds for people to have a look at. So I'm happy to post the link to that in the chat if people are interested. Thank you very much for answering my questions. I'll definitely go back to the policy brief.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. And we are getting close to the hour. We have to wrap up questions in a bit, but we have one question that is really all about the next steps and how we can hold member states accountable to the principles and commitments outlined in the GDC, and how do we ensure implementation. Maybe we can go with that for now and then see which last questions to pick.
Yeah, timeline first, what we are working on. We are working on a 3-year timeline. There is, and this is the very last words that you will read at the end in paragraph 76 of the Global Digital Compact, is the high-level review. A high-level review in 3 years, in 2027, to take stock of progress. So I think what is important right now, there is no single accountability mechanism for member states. Of course, as you know, inside the UN, you have the Human Rights Council, you have different mechanisms throughout the system for different sorts of accountabilities in different areas. But since this is a political agreement, there is no mandatory implementation. There is a political commitment because it's a political agreement. So it is very important that all stakeholders, meaning civil society, meaning the private sector, meaning all of you, keep your government accountable to what they agree on, because they agreed on commitment on human rights, they agreed on commitments on closing the digital divides, on artificial intelligence. And while, as said over and over the last hour, that the implementation will be decentralized and multi-stakeholder, governments will also have a key role to play. And I imagine most of the world will take a leading role in steering this implementation. So I think it's very, very important to match what the UN will be doing in terms of working with you all when it comes to implementing the compact, to have a bottom-up reaction to make sure that not only your government, but your cities, your local authorities are aware of the Global Digital Compact and follow up on that. Just as a personal experience, I was I'm from a very small town in the countryside of Italy, and I was very surprised. And I'm coming from a family of teachers, of primary school teachers, and I was very surprised to hear kids talking about the Sustainable Development Goals, to have the kind of understanding with people that don't speak English. They're looked out of what is the UN. And in the best of possible words, this will happen as well for the Global Digital Compact. So you keep not only your governments accountable, but kind of like you spread the word of what the Global Digital Compact is about at the local level. So from your town strategy to your government strategy are aligned with what leaders agreed upon at the UN level.
Thank you so much. We do have a few more really interesting questions, but I think this is a great note to end it on with this call to action to all of us. So thank you so much for all these great questions, and sorry about the ones that we didn't get to. There were so many great ones in there, and I am very grateful to Filippo for responding to them in such a knowledgeable and helpful way. I do think I've learned a lot, and I hope you did too. As we're closing the session, maybe I'm reopening the poll, the one that worked from the start, and we'll just redo it and see if you all have learned a bit more about the GDC and would rate your knowledge differently now. Let me restart it, and then we'll close the webinar after this.
That's a lot of pressure on the briefer.
That's true, but I hope it's going to be a compliment to the speaker mostly. But also it seems to be too much pressure on Zoom. Zoom does not seem to want me to ask this again. So I think what this might mean is that we'll have to get your feedback either in the survey that follows this call, or actually, I think we figured it out. You should see it on screen now. Okay, I think before we ended, you can't see it yet, but let me tell you, there's more 4s and 5s coming in. A 100% have answered, so let's end the poll here and share the results. I hope you can see it on screen. We now have 20 people very familiar, 26 people quite familiar, and I'm sure the rest is gonna use the resources that we shared in the chat and that you mentioned, Filippo, to learn some more. And
there are still 0 and 1. Let's have a virtual coffee.
Exactly.
Available anytime.
Awesome. I see some thumbs up. I think people will hold you accountable for that. All right. Thank you again so much for for your great answers, and thank you all for participating. Hope to see you soon in the next event that we're hosting.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye.